Our editor asked, "How would you like a life on the open road with the stars?" With a blissful look, I immediately booked myself aboard the Rolling Stones bandwagon bound for Aylesbury and then Shrewsbury. My illusion of the sweet life was shattered when I saw the inside of the Stones van. Guitar cases, holdalls and drums were piled on top of one another till they hit the ceiling. I wedged myself into this little lot with our photographer. Lead guitarist Brian Jones had phoned to say he was late getting up. It was now afternoon, but these boys keep late hours. He said he would drive up on his own car and join us in Aylesbury. After only 15 minutes on the road, guitarist Keith Richards kneeled over in the front seat and slumped into Mick Jagger's lap. Bill Wyman noted, "That often happens. Keith's the Rip Van Winkle in the group. You can't keep him awake. He just flakes clean out and dozes off for a couple of hours." At this point, Charlie Watts, their drummer, turned on the wagon's radio and tuned into Radio Luxembourg. The Beatles single, From Me to You, came blasting out over the car radio, and Keith woke up in the front long enough to say, "Here comes the fog," before he flaked out again. Our speed dropped to about 15 miles an hour and we crept along following the cat's eyes in the middle of the road. Mick Jagger, the group's vocalist, was elected navigator, and he yelled when he caught sight of a rear light in front. I wasn't too happy about this because Mick has the longest locks in the group and the best part of his fringe seemed to be over his eyes. "The funny thing is we all have haircuts regularly," he said. "We like it long, but it often needs trimming to keep it in any sort of shape." Then, Mick and Charlie began talking over the old days to kill the time. It sounded like quite a life. Our 1-hour trip by now had taken 3, and we were on the outskirts of Aylesbury when Mick Jagger shouted that Brian Jones' car was looming out of the fog and about to pass us. Brian was obviously totally lost and heading in the opposite direction. We all yelled out of the windows but were unheard, and Brian disappeared into the smog. That is why there were only 4 Rolling Stones on stage at Aylesbury that night. By the time the first house was underway, tour manager Hal Carter was practically out of his mind. He had 1 Rolling Stone missing, and due to the fog, the Ronettes had not arrived at all. Compare Al Page told the audience before the Stones appeared that the Ronettes had telephoned from Watford at 6 o'clock, and they were still on their way 3 hours later. He got the night's biggest cheer with the announcement that the Ronettes had just arrived 5 minutes before the end of the show. The girls, Ronnie, Estelle and Nedra, hadn't even changed for their act. Dressed in the clothes in which they had travelled from London, they twisted, jived and sang their way right into the audience's heart. Ronnie, their vocalist, stumbled off stage after the act and kicked off 1 boot. "The boots are great, but they were never meant for dancing in," she said. The Ronettes are tremendous fun and well liked amongst showbiz people. In fact, one particular Ronette had a telephone call from a Beatle every night on that tour, including one which lasted over 2 hours. Hines, who was in a guest spot on the Aylesbury show, was particularly impressed. "That twist routine they do is a knockout. I've never seen anything like it," he said. The Stones caused the biggest sensation backstage at this show by managing to smuggle in some bacon and eggs. Marty Wilde was astounded. "I've never seen anything like it. I'm lucky if I can get a packet of crisps." Next day I travelled up to Shrewsbury with Marty in his MG, and we stopped off at the 40s Cafe on the M1 for dinner. Marty made up for his lack of bacon and eggs the previous night and washed an enormous meal down with 3 milkshakes, his favourite drink. The Ronettes joined us and proved quite conclusively that they too get hungry from travelling. "We haven't eaten since breakfast," Nedra said. "I'm starving. Have you got any porridge?" Nedra is just crazy about the porridge here. She had never had anything like it in America. Unfortunately, porridge was off, so she settled for a salad. The Rolling Stones joined the party, and after they had eaten, we all trooped out into the car park for pictures. We had a little trouble getting Marty's car to start, so the cast gave him a push-off. That must have been a record for a star-studded shove. Once the show began in Shrewsbury, everything was organized chaos again backstage. Electric guitars and leads trailing everywhere, frantic hammerings on artists' doors and cries of, "You're on in 3 minutes." People tore up and down stairs, in and out of dressing rooms, on and off stage, and I finally collapsed in the first available chair. I'd had about 2 hours sleep in 48 hours. When I returned, my editor asked, "Did you have a nice cushy time gallivanting around with all the stars?" "That's good. There are 4 days paperwork in your office to be cleared this morning. Anyone know a quiet place where I can hibernate?" In an interview a few years ago, Ronnie Spector shared these memories about the tour.
We were headliners over in London and the Rolling Stones were our opening act. That's how we met them. They were great guys. I loved Keith and he loved me. My sister Estelle was usually with Mick, and Nedra was with Brian. There was not a lot of sex and all that kind of stuff going on with us. My mother toured with us everywhere, so I didn't get really a chance to do anything. One time, we had to stop driving because of the fog. So Keith and I got off the bus looking for a light, for a house. I said, "Keith, you stand at the back of me," because he has always had that rugged look and I look sort of neat. So I said, "Let me knock, I'm a girl." And I'll never forget, when we found one, this little lady, she was like round and short, she came to the door and I said, "Hi, I'm Ronnie of the Ronettes and our van is stuck." And Keith would say, "I'm Keith from the Rolling Stones." And she said, "Come on in," and she gave us scones and tea, which we took back to the bus. You couldn't do that today. People don't even open the door today.